So, as you may have recently heard, the Senate approved, in a bipartisan way, in a bipartisan fashion, because they love that shit so much, a $1 trillion infrastructure bill. So, what I want to do is talk about this, talk about what I think about it, give you the details of it, and where we should go from here. And I'll start off by firstly giving you the details of the bipartisan infrastructure bill that the Senate passed. So, they passed it, I think, on a 69 to 30 vote, I believe, which is overwhelming support. That's quite surprising. 19 Republicans voted for the bill, and you'll be very surprised to find out who were among the people that voted yay on that bill. But first, let me give you the details of the legislation. So it includes $73 billion for electric grid and power infrastructure, $66 billion for passenger and freight rail, $65 billion for broadband investments, which decreases the amount of money that residents will pay for internet, I believe, in rural areas. $55 billion for water systems and infrastructure, so pipes, things of that nature. $50 billion for Western water storage, $39 billion for public transit, $25 billion for airports, $21 billion for environmental remediation projects, $17 billion for ports and waterways, $15 billion for electric vehicles, $11 billion for road and safety. So basically, what this is a through and through run-of-the-mill infrastructure bill. I mean, that's all it is. That's pure infrastructure that it outlines right there. Now, what do I think about it? It has a $1 trillion price tag. This bill is insufficient. It's a decent bill. Okay, it looks good on the face of it, but it's insufficient, and it doesn't adequately address the problems and future problems that we currently face and will face in the very near future. Okay, and so if you haven't noticed, the weather has been insane lately. The vast amounts of rain that we've gotten, the western parts of this country are currently on fire. Okay. If you look around the world, Germany is literally underwater right now, or certain parts of it. I mean, this climate disaster isn't something that's like down the line anymore. It's happening, and we're living in it. And, this is only the beginning, as experts will tell you. It's going to get much worse than this if we don't take the adequate steps. And this isn't adequacy right here. This far falls short of what we need to do. Okay, there isn't enough spending in this bill, which is why I believe that it got so much overwhelming support. Now, let me read to you a couple of Republicans who supported this bill. Mitch McConnell, wow. Mitt Romney, wow. Chuck Grassley, wow. Tom Tillis of North Carolina, I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, but when you really think about it, the reason that they're supporting this bill, I believe, is for a couple of reasons. First of all, this bill isn't that expensive, okay? And so they don't have to find ways to, quote unquote, pay for it, even though there are many ways that they can pay for this bill, as well as the other bill that I'll get into in just a second. They want to show overwhelming support for this bill, so it puts pressure on the House progressives and Nancy Pelosi to vote for it, because if you aren't aware, the House progressives and Nancy Pelosi basically said they will not vote for this bipartisan bill unless the partisan $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill is passed along with it. So that leads me to my next point. That 3.5 reconciliation bill needs to be passed, or at the very least something almost close to it, like 2.5, 3 trillion. I've seen many, commentators and many other people that are, into this stuff saying that it can't go below 2 trillion. And I agree. I would draw the line at 2.5 trillion, but we'll just have to wait and see, because as I just outlined, the $1 trillion bill doesn't adequately address the problems that we're facing. Our infrastructure is old, it's outdated, we have a climate crisis coming, we don't have enough green and renewable energy. There's so many problems that we need to fix, and that bill doesn't adequately address those problems. But this $3.5 trillion bill, one would argue, and they'll be right on arguing, that it doesn't go far enough, but it goes much further than what that $1 trillion bill goes. And that's why I believe it got overwhelming support, because they're not trying to support the bipartisan bill. Joe Manchin even came out and dropped a statement basically saying that, and I hate this guy, Joe Manchin. He dropped a statement saying, the $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill, reconciliation bill, would be bad for West Virginians. This guy's delusional. He knows what he's doing. He's incredibly corrupt. He knows what he's doing. He says that he fears for the spending of the bill. It'll be too much. It'll overheat the economy. They love using that word overheat. I want to read to you a little bit of information from this CNN article that I got that I think is incredibly potent and really does a good job of explaining the situation at hand. So it says, at the start of the year, the American Society of Civil Engineers estimated that the cumulative U.S. investment needs into 2029 are $6.1 trillion. But there is currently only $3.5 trillion in existing funds allocated for future spending, creating a shortfall of $2.6 trillion over a decade, or $260 billion per year. So far, that financing gap is translating into a deep, chronic shortfall of investment spending. So do you kind of get a general idea of how much we need to actually spend to address this problem that is our infrastructure? And to pay for these bills, to adequately pay for it, you would have to raise taxes on the rich and corporations. And that is what should be done. But the Republicans and the more conservative Democrats would not like to do that, which is why I return to the point why so much bipartisan support was behind that $1 trillion bill. Because the way that they're planning to pay for it is through spending cuts and additional revenues. But as the CNN article points out, according to the CBO, the offsetting spending cuts are roughly $109 billion, and the new revenues are only $50 billion, leaving $256 billion in increased deficits over the coming decade. So it'll increase the deficit even more. But they don't want to raise taxes on the rich. They don't want to make the corporations pay. We're just stuck at a standstill here. But I want to read you something else. The tax evasion in this country from the richest people runs at about $600 billion per year. And they don't even want to do tax enforcement. The Republicans are against the IRS really cracking down on tax enforcement to make these people pay their taxes. So they don't want to do anything on that front, which is why so much support is behind that $1 trillion bill. And so, like I said before, this puts a lot of pressure on the House Democrats and Nancy Pelosi. But this is where winners are made. This is where champions are made. Let's see how they stand. Let's see if they stand. Let's see if they lay down like a hit dog like they do on every other issue. Okay? Cori Bush's efforts were valiant. I commend her for that. Sleeping on the steps of the Capitol got Joe Biden to extend the eviction moratoriums. Let's see you fight again. Let's see the House progressives band together and fight again. Okay? They said they weren't going to vote for the bill unless they got their bill passed. Oh, and by the way, before I end this video, allow me to, I almost forgot, elaborate a little bit on what the $3.5 trillion Democratic proposal will be. This is from Investopedia. $135 billion for the Committee on Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry, $332 billion for the Banking Committee, $198 billion for the Energy and Natural Resources. So that's clean energy right there. $67 billion for the Environment and Public Works Committee, $1.8 trillion for the Finance Committee, $726 billion for Health, Labor, Education, and Pensions Committee. So that's universal pre-K right there. Tuition-free community college for 2 years, I believe, and funding for HBCUs. Okay, and an expansion of the Pell Grant for higher education. That's amazing right there. That's honestly amazing. $37 billion for HSGAC Committee, $107 billion for the Judiciary Committee, $20.5 for the Indian Affairs Committee, $25 billion for small businesses, and $18 billion for Veteran Affairs and $83 billion for Commerce Committee. So That has a lot of good things in it, but that's the bill in its entirety. As it goes through its processing, I imagine that some of those things are going to get knocked off. At the very least, I hope they keep, among things they keep, I hope the universal pre-K remains and the tuition-free community college remains. But we'll just have to wait and see. But that bill comes much further to addressing the problems and the existing ailments that this country faces. But we'll just have to wait and see what kind of fight the House progressives put up. If they're going to stand their ground, are they going to lay over? I hope that they don't, but knowing them, you never know.